All right. So the first one is, all right, let's assume that I'm implementing a new point solution or a new ERP, and so I want to sort of create some documentation about it. So I want to add to my data system inventory information on the new system. So here I am in the Data Cookbook. I'm logged into IData on our demo account. My homepage, I'm logged in as an admin, so I can sort of do everything right now, but users have different sort of permissions. I can search it. I can see sort of the list of tasks assigned to me. There's all these different tabs for definitions, your catalog of specifications or data deliverables, data quality components, and then your data systems. This is your data system inventory, also sort of set up for your organization. Admin, I have a bunch of things. And then the community area, this is an area where we have things like all the iPads definitions and all that kind of stuff. And actually, you can go to the community. You don't have to be a Data Cookbook member. It's at community.datacookbook.com, and you can sort of see the content that's in there and even download it. But if you're a Cookbook user, you can sort of interact with it and import that into your system. That's a good place also to seed your account. Let's start with the data system. So here I am am I browsing my data system. So let's say that I currently have my Lucy and Banner ERP. We have the ability, you could sort of just document the general difference information about it, but you can also import the entire data model, right? We have two ways to do that. Well, really three. One is you can use some open source tools to run some schema crawling information that will pull the data out in some standard formats, and then we have an import of that, that you sort of go click and say, I'm going to import this file manually. Or you can use our integration suite, and our integration suite includes an enterprise service bus that you install within your environment securely, and one of the features is it'll automate the synchronization with your data system. You go set it up in there, and it'll push it out, and so you don't have to continually run it. But ultimately, what that's doing is it's pushing in this information, taking it. In this case, it's coming out of the Oracle database with all the information that's in there, on all the tables, all the columns, all the indexes, and the procedures, and the comments and everything that's in that system. And when you can search it, you can do all sorts of things, and that really becomes a good source of documentation. You'll see how later you can take that information and connect it to definitions and things like that. So we also have here, another thing is it's a repository for documentation if you so choose. So outside of just that table, there we go. Here I'm in my system. I could go down on my Saturn schema and look at all the tables, or I could also search here. Our demo box is running particularly slow for some reason right now. Look at the tables, do everything, or I can search. So if I wanted to look for, let's see if we have something. There's 15 tables that have GPA in it, right? 347 columns that have GPA. Wow, that's crazy. And if you get down here, let's see. It has these like auto-generated ERD diagrams that say like, oh, this SHRT GPA is connected to this. So this is just, like, you haven't had to do any sort of data entry or anything here. There's just a little bit of configuration, and it imports all this information. So if this is your current system that you're going from, now we have this information in a single place. Now you may have other documentation like this, but now this is actually, this is connecting to your current system with all that detail, and it's in your data governance knowledge base. So now you can go also set up one for let's say you're implementing Workday HR. Okay, so you're keeping your banner system for finance and for student, but you're going to implement Workday HR, right? So this is the new system. So you take that, you load it, you also import the thing, and I'm going to have some time at the end if we have. I'll talk specifically how we do our Workday integrations for this, because it's different. Workday, if you don't know, is not a relational database under the covers, so we have a different way that we interact with that. But anyway, you can import that, and you have all of that information, also documentation. So this just becomes this repository. Now you have both systems and all the data models in there. You can put other information. This is also a place where you can talk about access and quality and policy rules and things. You can put that in here. Let's have another area that we call our collections, where you can put any sort of policy documentation and have approval of that. So that gives you some idea about how you can document the data systems, and that'll work for major systems or for tiny little things that you might be implementing and want to just put that in, let it be known to the organization what the system is and what's there from a technical metadata standpoint. All right, now the next thing you might want to be is you might be working on your data migration specification, right? So you might likely, if you've ever been involved in a major data migration, it usually involves a whole lot of spreadsheets, right? Which is fine. So you can still build your spreadsheets and do all of your mapping. We have in our tool the ability to build specs for things like a migration, where you can document the source and the target and the fields and all of that. And you may choose to do that, and maybe overkill. You might still want to use these like the consolidated large documents for it, but there's certain things that you do want to capture, like to document. When you have those mappings, it becomes really useful to understand the lineage between those two systems, or for people to understand that this field was this other field in the previous system. But also it's really interesting for code value mapping. So this is showing an example of a mapping, an ETL mapping that's going from a transactional system, still Banner in this case, to a data warehouse, a Helio campus in this case. So you have this sort of mapping. You can set that up. You can add in, this is sort of any functions if you want, or you can do things like, we're coming from this to this. We wanted to do a code translation. Is that process? And you see, this translates using the submit codes, translate, whatever. So now that is, so you could document it here. And now once this is done, this actually becomes lineage documentation for the future. And that's just like, unlike the spreadsheets that you might have created and shared around, this is something that can persist and show interesting value to people for where things came from. You also have a way to import, so you could take those spreadsheets and turn them in a way to import and create this sort of ETL mapping. So we've got this mappings and code values. There is a place you can store all your reference data. You can set up mappings between them. You can approve them. You can synchronize them with your database if you want, so that is automated and coming in. So it's just a good way to manage the code values between your systems and understand how things go. And if you want to have a history of what happened in the data migration, which people tend to ask, that can also be documented in sort of the lineage components there. All right. You can also just use to approve like your code settings. So if you just, rather than having the synchronization, if you just want to say, well, what are we calling our, statuses in this thing, or our campuses? And if you're thinking of changing the names, you can just use it to approve values before you go build them, or other configuration choices, and manage those. Like have a single repository where you can put that information. You can also establish data quality rules. We don't have time to go into that, but that's a thing where, as you're doing this, you can start to determine some validations that you might want to have, or some things that would be important to track on data quality. And data migration is actually a really good way to create data quality problems. So it's kind of good to have some of that documented. You can have, again, it's this opportunity sort of touching everything and doing some evaluation. If you come up with some business rules or data quality rules, you can document in the system. Also with our integration suite, you can schedule it to run those quality rules and tell you if there's been any problems. So you could actually use it for some automated validation of your data if you want. You can also use it then to deliver data training. With governance, you want to deliver data training and facilitating self-service reporting. So in this case, if you've documented your database, if you have documentation there, if you have your data dictionary, which I haven't talked about fully, and everything, this is a place for people to go look. If you've imported things from your data reporting tools, it's a place to go look. All right, last thing I talk about, managing the reporting migration effort with the data governance knowledge base. So this is sort of brings a lot of these things together, and we're going to go ahead and walk through this process. So this is a specific process, an 8-step process that we recommend. You don't have to follow it exactly. We'll just go ahead and step with this. So the first thing is to start with an inventory, right? So you have probably, if you're doing anything like this, a reporting migration or a SIS migration or ERPR migration, that in your current system you have some list of reports that you're going to need to recreate, right, or evaluate. So the first thing is you have that inventory of items. And so you want to take that, somehow extract that out of your current system. There's usually a way to do that. And you can use a spreadsheet to do this if you want. You have this whole list of things. You're going to go through and sort of cut it down, right? So decide like, oh, of this, 1,000 reports that we have, go through some process of ruling them out. And when you get what you think is the likely ones, it doesn't have to be entirely accurate. Now you have this list of reports that exist in your old system that you want to evaluate to recreate in the next system. All right. So in this, you want to capture as part of this the reporting name, the purpose of it, and any sort of additional info to help you to prioritize. And the other thing you want to do is to prioritize those reports. And then you want to cull them down for duplicates or unnecessary. So when you get a pretty good system, then you want to import that into the cookbook. And this screenshots are actually from when we did this 5 years ago, so they have the old logo and everything. But you set that up and do a CSV import into your process. It'll do that. It'll create all these things. It'll tell you if there's any errors or problems with it. But in general, it creates that report. It'll also, if you've got sort of data fields and things in there, you don't have to, but it can create this. So it generates all the reports in the cookbook, and it actually puts them in this report request queue to be worked on. So you have this option at this point, depending on how you want to manage it. You can go assign it to people to go start working on it, right? We'll talk about what that means, or you could let people just pick them off the list and things like that. But it actually loads them all in a queue. So this can be used not just to sort of put all this information in your cookbook, in your knowledge base, but also to manage the sort of process of going through them. You probably want to sort them by type or whatever. There's ways to do that, and there's filters on that report queue that you can manage. So you can assign that out if you so choose, or you can have self-assignment to who's going to work on them, and you can do some bulk assignments. All right. Now you get this process, and you get notified that you have, if you're, you might have a team of 5 people doing this. You get notified that you've got a set of reports you have to work on. You can go in there and start working on it. And the person, you can assign collaborators if you want to also sort of say, like, here's some experts or whatever. But the data stewards can also be involved in this process. And so the first step, to whatever level of extent you want, we encourage people to document the existing report, right? And we're doing this to create a specification for the new report to be created, right? So we're operating on the assumption that these reports are functionally accurate, right? Now they may not, like you may also use this process to identify some problems with the reports, but if we assume that this list of, maybe you called it down to 200 reports are what you want to recreate, then you could start with the existing report as the way to document. So you want to go fill in the information about the purpose and what pieces of data are on that. And when you add data definitions or items to the report, you're actually adding it to your dictionary, and then it's forcing you to come up with a definition for it at that time. You might not be the person to do it though as a report writer. If you just go create a definition for GPA, and because you have that on your report, but you don't actually know what that GPA is, you probably can glean the technical definition because you're looking at the current report from the legacy system, but that actually puts it into the data governance workflow. And so in this case, you're creating a specification for the new report, you're adding definitions, that adds a definition to the business glossary area. So if you have something like I'm in the specification area, sorry. In the definitions area, I have a definition for, let's say, academic credit, right, or active academic program, okay, that needed to be on the report. And you can search through these or whatever. But I'm building my report, and I need to pull active academic program. I'm going to take it. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to come up with what I think my definition is, or maybe I'm lucky you already have a definition. Fill this in. It is assigned to a functional area. This is coming in the student area, and you can set up your organization however you want. It's going to route this to the data steward to review, right? And what I'm having is I'm adding to my data dictionary the definition of active academic program that will be approved at this moment, as soon as the person can get back to me with an actual valid definition for active academic program, right? And I'm doing this as part of the report migration process. Right? Then I can fill in the technical details. And the technical details it's where you can sort of either narratively or even in the spec-wise document what the how you're pulling it from your current system. So if you recall, let me go ahead and edit this. The approved version. Let's go to the pending version. I have the whole Banner metadata tables in here. If this report is coming out of Banner, I can go down to the technical definition for Banner on this particular item and click the browse and search for GPA. That's actually not what we're what we're dealing with here, but go find that field. Let's say just and drop that into my technical definition. Right, so this is the narrative explanation about where this thing lives in your banner system. Right, now you might be asking, like, why are we going this effort of documenting the old system? And you can make a judgment call on whether or not you think that's necessary, but it really helps to define what that old report looked like, and you don't have to go into great detail, but if you say sort of what this thing, how it works. Right now, let's say independently for me over there is Jim, and Jim's working on a set of reports. And he also has academic program, right? If he goes and documents that in the cookbook, he'll see that it's already there. I've already done mine and it's approved and the definition's there, and he doesn't have to start that process again, right? He's good to go. Or he might see that his active academic program in that old report was actually different than mine, and then you've got an interesting problem, like there was issues with the old reports. So once you document that, now the next thing you can do is to go basically define the report in the new system and add the technical definition for where you want to get it out of. In this case, I might say, oh, I'm pulling it out of, Workday now, which doesn't make a lot of sense for this because my Workday HR. And I can browse that data system and pull that in and map that. And now I've documented this data field, how I want it out of the new system. I've created a report spec, and so here's a, let's pick an example of a report spec. Here's my applicant say by program specification. So this is the report. Let's say this is the one I built. I've got the details on where it's coming out of Workday HR right now. Now that I've got this documented, each one has a unique ID to it. And let's say that I'm building my reports in Tableau now. And so this is this Tableau report for applicant say by program. We have a really simple widget that you can install with whatever logo you want there that calls our API script. With that, all you need to know is the ID of this thing, and then that calls our process and pulls up the information from that spec. Right, so you're using this to manage the creation of the new reports. You're getting collision of multiple people who are working on it. You're getting resolution on definition ideas, and you're documenting the technical details for these definitions, and you're also building the documentation that you can then embed in the report for when people go and turn on and implement your new HR system. Voila, when they look at this and say, well, this doesn't look right, they can click on it and go, oh, that's because they define it differently or whatever. So that really helps the process. So I kind of walked through a number of those things on defining the definitions, but we have some screenshots here. You're updating the different components of the technical specification in the new report. You're developing the new report, and then as I said, you're going to link it back, and you can mark the process as complete, and it's also a way to manage it. You can have queues to look and see how things are progressing.